Record. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this month's lightning session. If you're new to the Feed Learning community, welcome. These are free monthly 30-minute webinars with a different topic every month for people managers. They're short, they're to the point, and they also give you simple tools to develop your skills. Starting next month, we'll be creating manager meetups where you can meet up other managers and kind of share experiences and help each other problem solve as well. So my name is Jessie. For those of you who have never met me, I'm the founder of Feed Learning, and Feed Learning is a talent organizational development firm. Essentially, if you're looking for training, management development training, feel free to reach out to us. So before we dive in, just a little bit of housekeeping. This webinar is being recorded, but only Arielle's face, my face will be shared unless you decide to unmute yourself, which is fine as well. You'll also receive a presentation deck at the end, either today or tomorrow. And if you have any questions, feel free to either unmute yourself, put it in a chat, or even stay back with Arielle as well, and she's happy to answer any of your questions. All right, so let's talk about why we are here today. So I'm here with Arielle. She's a dear friend of mine. She used to be in Westchester, weren't you? But now you're in the city, Arielle. Okay. So she's going to facilitate today's workshop on maximizing your one-to-one meetings. I'm super excited about this topic. I also teach this in a way, but I love to see your style, Arielle. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to you. You do your intro and we'll get started.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. It's nice to see people's faces on the screen. I hate feeling like I'm just talking into a void, so thank you for being on camera with me. My name is Arielle Alonso, and I am an executive coach and the founder of Revel&Awe. Our mission is to help managers become leaders by coaching them to build the confidence and the practical skills that they need to develop and lead effective teams. My background is in consulting. I got my BA in English from Tufts. I got my MBA at Tel Aviv University, and I am a certified professional coach. I've worked with thousands of employees all over the US, all over the world. I've been very fortunate to have great experiences working specifically with managers. And it really helped me identify that the one-to-one is such a oftentimes missed opportunity, and it's worth talking about. So today we're going to be talking about specifically why these one-to-ones are so important. We're going to dive into a simple framework to help you organize these meetings so they can be effective and efficient. And finally, I'll share some best practices for using the framework and using your one-to-ones generally. Really want to help you feel confident going into the next one-to-one that you have coming up, whether that's today or later this week or next month, whatever it might be. So would love to hear from you all in the chat. How often do you cancel your one-to-one? Scale of 1 to 5. 1 is I absolutely never cancel. 3, once in a while. And 5 is I cancel it every time. No judgment, by the way, if you cancel it every time. Okay, we got a 2. So sometimes 1, never cancel. 2, 2, okay. Not too many cancellations. Already off to a really strong start. If you, okay, rescheduling often. If you do cancel, if you do reschedule a lot, that's really common. We're going to talk a little bit about why this happens and why we should maybe not. So as we all know, managers are under a ton of pressure. Researchers from Gartner's HR practice have shared some perhaps not so surprising statistics about some of the frustrations and the pressures that mid-level managers are experiencing. Starting with more than 51% of the managers surveyed feel that they have more responsibilities than they can effectively manage. 54 of those surveyed are suffering from work-induced stress and fatigue. 44% are struggling to provide that personalized support to their direct reports. And 1 in 5, 20%, would actually prefer not to manage people if given a choice, which it feels really wild to me, but maybe not so surprising given that so many managers are promoted because of their effective performance as individual contributors and maybe not given the best tools or training to become effective managers. So makes sense that some of them might feel like they'd rather just not deal with it. So given that managers are facing so much pressure, so much workload, and a lot of push and pull from upper management, from their direct reports, what oftentimes ends up happening, right? We cancel the meeting, we reschedule it, we want to make it work later, we're going to squeeze it in, I promise. In the end, we might just cancel it after all. And maybe you say to yourself, oh, it's just this one time, my direct report, they'll understand. But another week might roll around and you find yourself reaching for that button to reschedule or just cancel altogether. But ultimately, one-to-one meetings are really critical. When the individuals on the team do well, managers do well too, because their success is directly tied to the performance of their direct reports. So we know that one-to-one meetings create better and more efficient output and performance of the team. They increase trust and psychological safety, and they improve employees' experiences, their motivation, and their overall engagement, which ultimately leads to reduced turnover, lower training needs, all of the things that we want to ensure a strong team. Which is why setting an agenda can be so helpful, right? It helps us gain clarity about the most important things that we need to discuss. It can set the structure and tone for the conversation, and it helps strengthen your confidence going into the meeting, right? It saves time for both you and your direct report. You can proactively share the agenda with them before the meeting so they also have an opportunity to prepare or add their own topics. And ultimately, setting an effective agenda often requires just strong prioritization so that you and your direct report can have alignment about what are the most important topics and directions that you could take the meeting in. This saves time ultimately, right? So you might not have the need or the time to cover every single thing that you want to in a one-to-one meeting, which is why I have this model called the figure, I'll call it a menu of sorts, to help you set up your one-to-one agenda to make sure that it's really focused. And I'm going to share it in a second, but what I will say is you can think of this like a menu, right? I figure if I'm going to have an agenda, here's my menu and I can pick and choose. So this breaks down into 6 pieces. Realistically, depending on the length of your meeting, you might only get to 1 or 2 of these categories. You're also welcome to adapt topics as they're relevant for your needs, your team's needs, and that might even be something that is a great topic of conversation for your next one-to-one to have your direct reports also give you input on how they want to manage. So the F in figure stands for feedback, meaning delivering and receiving specific and timely feedback. Then we have input or inquiry, and this is where you can use the meeting to ask or answer questions and provide more clarity. Then we have goals, where we can integrate professional and personal development goals and track progress on those things throughout the course of the year. Updates on tasks or projects, creating visibility for the employee's work. Roadblocks or red flags, right? Identifying any challenges that are coming up, getting transparency, providing any necessary support, and expectation setting, right? So often things get lost in the mix, people get confused. Here's an opportunity to set, reset, realign expectations for what success looks like. So let's dive into feedback first, right? And again, this can be done in any order. Figure just sounds easy to remember. So this is one of the pieces that I think is one of the more crucial ones. They're all very important, but feedback often gets sidelined and usually addressed in performance evaluations, mid-cycle reviews, things like that. But early and often feedback is so important. So let's start with soliciting feedback because feedback for you as a manager is also crucial, right? For your own improvement, for your ability to effectively support your team. So here, I want to share a couple of scripts or structures that you can use to solicit feedback from your team. I always like to start with context, right? I want to learn how I can better support you. I want to make sure that I can be a great resource for you. I want to make sure that I'm leading our meetings with the team effectively. Then you can ask a question, something that's targeted, like what's something that I could do to support you more effectively? How can I better support this project moving forward? So this way you can ask for something targeted and open the floor for your direct report to give you some feedback that they might otherwise not volunteer directly, even if they're thinking about it in the moment. If you have any questions on soliciting feedback, please feel free to drop them in the chat or let me know afterwards, because this can be sometimes uncomfortable or challenging, but I love opening the floor to solicit feedback because it also then opens the door to receiving feedback more openly, which can be challenging for a lot of people. Which is why it's also important to deliver feedback regularly. And if it's not clear, I'm a big fan of feedback. People often think about it like the dreaded F word, but actually feedback is so important and it can really be a gift. So I think delivered early, often, so much so that it just feels like a regular part of any conversation and doesn't start to awaken any stress response or defensiveness. Studies show that the optimal ratio of positive to constructive feedback is anywhere between 3-to-1 to even 6-to-1 pieces of positive to constructive feedback. So these 1-to-1 meetings can really be a great opportunity to lean into both the positive and constructive feedback. One really simple and effective model is the SBI model. And when you get these slides later, you'll be able to just click on the link that gives you more information about this. But SBI stands for Situation, Behavior, Impact, where you share really simple sentence like, at yesterday's meeting, just the situation, you interrupted John on a few occasions. That's the observed behavior. This gave the impression that you didn't respect his contributions, right? That's the impact that you observed. Can you share your perspective on this, right? That can help to create a conversation around it. It's not just me judging you as your manager and saying you did something wrong, but rather here's something that I'm observing, and I think maybe there's a different way to do it. Sometimes it can also be helpful to ask for permission to deliver feedback, especially constructive feedback, so that your direct report has the choice to move forward and open the door, or to let you know that they might not have the capacity to receive that kind of feedback in the moment, right? Maybe they've got a lot on their mind, or they're really stressed, or they've got some personal things going on and they're not in the space to be able to receive it. That's okay. We can move on. We can also reschedule that conversation to make sure that they're in a better place to be able to receive the feedback without defensiveness or an emotional trigger response. Then we come to input, right? What if they're never ready? That happens frequently. They think they're not ready. Ultimately, I think there's an opportunity to coach them around how to receive feedback more effectively, right? Ultimately, it's for their benefit. It's really hard to grow when you don't know what your blind spots are, and letting them realize that they actually benefit from the feedback is going to be helpful. I'll also say that starting off by providing positive feedback and building that trust early on can be helpful to then help them feel like, oh, if I get negative feedback, negative in quotes, right? If I get constructive feedback, if there's something that I'm doing wrong, that I still know that my manager has my back and it's not a commentary on me. Yes, great point, Jesse. Maybe you can let them choose when to receive the feedback if they're not ready now. Yeah, let them kind of guide it. Never is not an option. um, okay, so for input, right? Sometimes during the week, questions get lost, information gets lost in the chaos of all our different communication channels. This part of the agenda is a area where you can provide additional information or guidance or context and support to your direct report. While you can prompt them to open up the conversation, and I provided some questions on the screen here, this is also an area where they can feel really empowered to just pepper you with questions. This things to consider, right? Is your direct report missing any information that they need to complete the next step of their work? Do you need to provide input on how to use a particular tool or help them better understand how their current task or project fits into the team's goals? Is your direct report having a conflict or struggling to communicate with a peer or a stakeholder, and they might need your perspective on how to handle it? Allow your direct report here to prioritize their most important questions, right? Things that are time sensitive, high priority, that impact others, and give them some room to explore what kind of input they need from you. Goals. Okay, typically, and let me know if this resonates for you. Typically, we set goals once every 6 months, maybe every 12 months during an evaluation cycle. And then what often happens is people set them and then they forget about them until right before the review cycle comes back around, right? And then we're struggling and scrambling to justify whether or not we've met those goals come the next evaluation cycle. The goals at that point are feel arbitrary and not really motivating, and they probably don't actually help us develop because we haven't been working on them during the course of the year. So, as a manager, one of your responsibilities is to help your direct reports achieve their development goals. Occasionally integrating these progress discussions about their goals and infusing these conversations into your one on ones can be helpful to create both accountability and alignment on how those goals fit into the rest of their work. Talking about career or development goals every 4 to 8 weeks, even if it's just a quick, like, how's it going on this thing, also gives your direct report opportunities to raise any progress or challenges or obstacles or requests for additional input that they need. Really, the goal here is to let them know that they're supported, they can feel empowered to prioritize their own development alongside whatever their daily scope is, or to align those development goals into whatever their scope is. So questions like, what do you hope to gain, experiences or skills? What do you find most fulfilling? How can we help you do more of that? Are there any areas of the business or any particular projects that you want to look into or explore or pursue? Then we come to updates, right? Status updates tend to be the primary focus of most one-to-ones. And that's understandable, right? There are so many checklists that we have on all the different tasks and projects that everyone on the team is responsible for. And it's important to talk about. Typically, though, there are other venues where you can go through the checklist in more detail. So even though the updates are important to talk about in your one-to-ones, it might not be the only topic that you talk about, right? The goal of the figure model is really to open up the menu of options so you're not only going through the checklist on a rote basis every week. So, yes, we still want to talk about it. It might still be a prominent part of your one-to-ones, but remember that there are other things that you can also talk about. So, talk about the status updates, talk about the recent milestones or achievements, positive outcomes that they've reached. This is also an opportunity for your direct reports to create some visibility about their wins, things that you might even be able to further amplify to your manager or the rest of the team to really celebrate what's going well for them. And to give them validation along the way that they're on the right track, that they're on pace to finish whatever project it is or whatever task it is, uh, along with whatever the goal or deadlines are. So, still important, 100%, and not the only thing that we want to be focusing on. And then we have roadblocks and red flags. One of the things that I hear so often from managers is, why didn't they tell me sooner, right? Why didn't they let me know that there was a problem earlier? And this is often because employees don't always feel like they have the ability to ask for help, or that it might reflect poorly on them if they raise a red flag early. And so having this on the agenda gives them permission to raise any challenges or obstacles or red flags earlier on so that you can address them. And one of the things that I often tell people, whether they're managers or even a manager has a manager, right, is that acknowledging and raising the flag early is a sign that you can identify challenges, and that's a sign that you can be an effective leader, right? It's not about whether or not you're capable of handling it. It might also be just a matter of, can I identify when these challenges are going on, raise the flag, even if I don't need any help, just to create that transparency and continue building trust. So Roadblocks and red flags, great opportunity to give your employee permission to talk about the challenges, talk about the obstacles, and offer any potential support that you can help or help them identify other avenues of support that they can access to move forward. And finally, the E, expectations, right? This is a great place to share metrics and the vision of success. One of the things that I hear over and over again is that people don't understand why they aren't on the same page as their manager, why they aren't getting promoted, why they're working so hard, but don't get a lot of validation. It's usually because there's a disconnect in how they understand what success looks like and what their expectations are. As a manager, setting, resetting, aligning, realigning expectations is really crucial to empower your team to feel that sense of clarity and purpose. Clear expectations help reduce confusion and increase clarity about how success is going to be measured, which ultimately helps all of you understand the roadmap, empowers people to take action toward whatever that end result is. So, by proactively and regularly discussing expectations, you can also then collaborate on setting up the roadmap, including allowing your direct report to even push back when expectations might feel unrealistic or unreasonable, and to clarify any questions that come up. So, offering the opportunity to let them reflect what they understand their current expectations to be. Where do they feel unclear? How can we clarify? How can I, as a manager, provide specific deliverables, a by when, a vision for what success is going to look like? How will we know that this is done and done well? Okay, I sped through all of the 6 components. Which part do you think that you feel like you feel called to bring into your next one-to-one? Feel free to drop that into the chat. Is it feedback? Do you want to amplify input, goals, updates, roadblocks and red flags, or expectation setting? Soliciting feedback, Karen? Yeah, all of them. Great. I love to hear that. Red flags and roadblocks. Absolutely. Amazing. I want to share a couple of quick, maybe not so quick, best practices, because sometimes we forget, and a lot of this might be emphasizing things that I've already mentioned. But let's just start with preparation, right? Preparing and sharing the agenda in advance, and I might even say better yet, give your direct report ownership over the agenda. Really empower them to prepare and lead the conversation. You can even create a shared document. You can list the figure components out and let them highlight where they want to focus, the top 2, 3 areas in each meeting. Totally reasonable. Getting employee input on objectives and priorities, especially in advance of the meeting, can prepare you both for where you're going to focus your attention, and make sure that you're aligning the priorities based on that urgency and importance, right? What's coming up next? What's high priority? Where are we going to focus our efforts so that we can make sure that the time that we spend together is really impactful? And if needed, we can always set up additional time afterwards or continue the conversation over chat or email. I've already emphasized, hopefully strongly enough, that consistency is key. And that's because canceling can really hamper direct reports' progress, and they'll often feel like a lower priority. And that hurts the trusting relationship that you're building in the long run. Now, there's a great article in HBR that highlights Stephen Rogelberg's research, and it's linked here. And according to his research, he's a researcher at UNC, there are 3 possible cadences that can be effective, right? Cadence is also really important, that consistency. Most effective is 30 minutes once a week for each employee, right? The next most effective is 45 to 60 minutes biweekly, every other week. There's a third option, which is hybrid, where you mix cadences based on individual employees' needs, where some people you meet with weekly and others biweekly. The goal overall is to be pretty consistent on scheduling, number one, and to try to spend about the same amount of time with each employee over the course of each month, so they all feel like they're getting an equal amount of support from you, right? So we don't want to create situations of unfairness, but we also want to cater sometimes to the individual employee's needs. So if 30 minutes per week per team member feels too much, on your calendar, then you can think about also integrating a different approach. And the one thing I also am going to emphasize here is to make sure, right, the follow-up is just as important. Making sure that your direct reports are on the same page as you by making sure that you and them are clarifying the takeaways and documenting any action items so that you can keep having that accountability in place. And finally, questions over directions, right? We want to make sure that the one-to-one is focused where it counts, which is on them. The one-to-one meeting is for your direct reports, so they should be driving the conversation and doing most of the talking. And according to Rogelberg, the biggest predictor of a one-to-one success is the employee's active participation measured by the amount of time that they are talking. The ideal ratio is 50 to 90% of the time. Out of that 30 minutes, 27 minutes at max, anywhere from 15 to 27 minutes, it should be them talking. One way to facilitate that ideal ratio is by asking really open-ended questions. So that's questions that start with what, how, when, who. We really want to yield more productive conversations. So questions that require them to think, to reflect, are going to yield more robust answers, right? What do you think about this? How could you move this forward? What support would be most helpful? And if any of you have ever worked with a coach or you've been a coach yourself, whether formally or informally, powerful questions, open-ended questions, these come up a lot in coaching. That's because we want our clients to be able to reflect. We want the same thing for our direct reports. Okay, so quick recap as we roll up on the almost 30-minute mark, right? We want to prioritize the one-to-one because it's going to improve our performance, our team's performance. We're going to increase trust and psychological safety on our teams, and we're going to improve and increase motivation and employee engagement. Having an agenda helps us clarify our objectives. You can feel free to lean into the figure model, pick and choose them from the menu of options that you have there, and prioritize and adjust as needed. And prepare, be consistent, ask lots of questions, and empower your employees, your team, to really take ownership and feel empowered during the course of that meeting and over the course of your relationship, really. Okay, I think I wrapped up on time. I'm happy to take any questions. I know we're at the 30-minute mark, but if anybody wants to share any questions, come off mute, stick around, I'm happy to stay on and answer anything that's come up for you. Thank you so much.
Arielle, thank you so much. I'll sum it up with I learned a couple of things about I think I need to ask more questions. I need to talk less in my one-on-one meetings. And then what was else? I love the idea of the figure model and letting them choose which topic they want to focus on and kind of printing it out or sending it to them, let them choose. I think that's awesome. But again, thank you so much, Arielle. Really appreciate your time today. I learned a lot today. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording but for those of you who want to stick around, if you have any questions, feel free to start asking.